In the hushed, manicured world of Willow Creek, where reputations are currency and secrets are poison, Margaret Lane was the perfect wife to a millionaire titan. She was graceful, intelligent, and impeccably silent. But when her husband Justin flaunted his affair at the town's most prestigious event, he fundamentally underestimated the woman he'd spent 15 years betraying. He expected tears. He expected a quiet, dignified retreat. What he got was a single, devastatingly public sign that didn't just expose his secret, it lit the fuse on a meticulously planned explosion that would bring his entire empire and the whole town's polite facade crashing down. This isn't just a story of heartbreak, it's a masterclass in revenge. The air in Willow Creek always seemed to carry the scent of money, a crisp, clean fragrance of freshly mown lawns, expensive perfume, and the subtle, underlying hum of ambition. It was a town built on success, a picture-perfect enclave where sprawling mansions hid behind ancient oak trees and wrought-iron gates. Here, image was everything, and the Lane family was royalty. Justin Lane was the king, a real estate magnate with a predator's smile and the kind of charisma that could sell sand in the desert. He had built his empire, Lane Holdings, from the ground up. He was a pillar of the community, his name etched onto plaques at the library, the hospital, and the local country club. And Margaret Lane was his perfect queen. To the outside world, she was the epitome of grace and quiet strength. An architect by training, she had set aside her own promising career to raise their two children, Liam and Chloe, and to curate the flawless public image that Justin's status demanded. Their home at 18 Willow Creek Lane wasn't just a house. It was a testament to her taste and his success, a sprawling Georgian manor that was frequently featured in glossy lifestyle magazines. It was also a cage, gilded and beautiful, but a cage nonetheless. For the past 2 years, the gold of the cage had begun to flake, revealing the cold iron beneath. It started with the little things. The late nights Justin explained away as investor dinners. The second phone that was always kept locked and out of sight. The scent of a perfume not hers that clung faintly to his suit jackets. Margaret wasn't naive. She was observant. She saw the way his eyes would glaze over when she spoke his attention already somewhere else. She noticed the private smirking texts that would light up his screen when he thought she wasn't looking. The whispers in town had started a few months ago, subtle at first, then growing more confident. Willow Creek was a piranha pool of gossip disguised as polite concern. Carol Ann, the resident queen bee of the country club, had made a comment over mimosas about seeing Justin's Bentley parked outside a trendy downtown apartment building, one not owned by his company. Margaret had simply smiled, a placid mask of disinterest, and changed the subject to the upcoming Founders Gala. The Founders Gala was the social event of the year, a black tie affair that brought out the entire town's elite to celebrate Willow Creek's founding, and more importantly, to reinforce their own place within its rigid hierarchy. It was an event the Lanes had chaired twice. This year, however, a chill had settled over the preparations in their home. A week before the gala, Justin had breezed into the kitchen, loosening his tie. He didn't kiss her hello anymore. About the gala, he'd said, pulling a bottle of sparkling water from the Sub-Zero fridge. I need you to sit this one out. Margaret had been arranging flowers, a mix of white hydrangeas and delicate delphiniums. She didn't stop her movements slow and deliberate. Oh, are you feeling unwell? She asked, her voice even. No, I'm fine. It's just a big night for the business. I'll be networking heavily. Some potential partners from Dubai are flying in. It's better if I go solo, keep things focused. The lie was so smooth, so practiced, it was almost impressive. Margaret snipped the stem of a hydrangea, the sound unnaturally loud in the silent kitchen. I see. You've never felt my presence hindered your business dealings before, Justin. In fact, I believe the last time you closed a major deal, it was over dinner with the Hendersons, a dinner I hosted." He sighed, the sound laced with impatience. "Margaret, don't make this difficult. It's just one event." She finally turned to look at him, her eyes clear and unreadable. "Of course, dear. Whatever you think is best for business." But Margaret knew. She knew it wasn't about business partners from Dubai. It was about Sienna Monroe. Sienna was everything Margaret wasn't. She was 26, a raven-haired, ambitious social media manager who had recently been hired to revitalize the Lane Holdings online brand. She was bold, brash, and had an Instagram feed filled with pouting selfies and luxury brand hashtags. Margaret had seen the charge on their joint American Express statement a month ago, a $12,000 Cartier love bracelet. It wasn't her birthday, it wasn't their anniversary, but a quick, painful scroll through Sienna's public profile had shown the bracelet gleaming on her wrist in a photo captioned, "Some girls just get lucky, Hajj blessed." Justin taking Sienna to the gala wasn't just an affair, it was a statement. He was tired of hiding. He was ready to trade in his classic elegant wife for a newer, shinier model, and he was going to do it on the town's biggest stage. It was the ultimate act of public humiliation, a clear signal to everyone in Willow Creek that Margaret Lane was being replaced. He thought she would crumble retreat into their cavernous home with her quiet dignity and her children, and eventually accept a quiet, tidy divorce. He had no idea that for Margaret, his decision wasn't an endpoint. It was a starting pistol. For the past year, ever since her suspicions had solidified into cold, hard certainty, Margaret had not been idle. She hadn't been crying into her pillow. She had been planning. Her initial shock and heartbreak had crystallized into something else entirely, a cold, focused rage. It wasn't just about the cheating, it was about the disrespect, the utter disregard for their 15 years of marriage, for the family they had built, for the sacrifices she had made. He was trying to erase her, to render her invisible. So Margaret had made a call, not to a divorce lawyer, not yet. Her first call was to a man named David Chen, a forensic accountant she'd been introduced to by a friend from her university days. Her second was to a discreet private investigator. While Justin was whining and dining, his mistress, Margaret, was poring over bank statements, Shell Corporation documents, and offshore account numbers. She was a woman who had designed buildings, who understood that a strong structure required a flawless foundation. She was now methodically cataloguing every crack, every weakness in the foundation of Justin Lane's empire. The week leading up to the gala was a masterpiece of controlled performance. Margaret played the part of the slightly wounded but understanding wife perfectly. She helped Liam with his calculus homework, attended Chloe's soccer game, and hosted a small book club meeting. She smiled, she laughed, she engaged. But beneath the surface, a different plan was clicking into place. She made several phone calls, finalizing arrangements with a calm precision that would have terrified Justin had he known. One was to a local media strategist. Another was to a billboard advertising company. On the evening of the gala, Justin stood before the hall mirror, adjusting his bow tie. He wore a custom Tom Ford tuxedo. He looked every bit the king of Willow Creek. "You're sure you'll be all right?" he asked, his voice laced with false concern. "Liam and Chloe are with your mother." "Yes, they're fine. She's taking them to the movies," Margaret replied from the doorway of their master bedroom. She was dressed in simple silk pajamas, looking serene. "You look very handsome, Justin. Have a wonderful time. Network well." He gave her a brief, dismissive nod. "I will. Don't wait up." He walked out the door, the engine of his Aston Martin roaring to life a moment later. He was on his way to pick up Sienna, to parade her in front of their friends, their colleagues, their entire world. Margaret walked over to the large bay window overlooking the driveway, watching the red taillights disappear down Willow Creek Lane. The house was silent. The air was still. She felt a tremor of nerves, but it was quickly suppressed by a wave of cold resolve. She picked up her phone, not the one Justin knew about, but a clean prepaid burner phone. She sent a single text message to a number she had memorized. Green light, execute now. She then walked downstairs, poured herself a glass of expensive scotch, Justin's favorite, a Macallan 25, and sat down in the dark living room. She wasn't going to the gala. She didn't need to. Her show was about to begin, and the entire town of Willow Creek had a front row seat. The Willow Creek Country Club was ablaze with light, a beacon of opulence against the darkening sky. Valets in crisp red jackets scurried to open the doors of arriving luxury cars, while inside the murmur of the town's elite filled the grand ballroom. Crystal chandeliers dripped light onto a sea of tuxedos and designer gowns. The air was thick with the clinking of champagne flutes and the practiced laughter of people who knew their every move was being watched. When Justin Lane arrived, a hush fell over the room, followed by a wave of excited whispers. It wasn't just his presence that commanded attention, but who was on his arm. Sienna Monroe was a vision in a daring blood-red gown with a slit that ran dangerously high up her thigh. The Cartier bracelet gleamed under the lights. She clung to Justin's arm, her smile a mixture of triumph and nervous excitement. She was making her debut, staking her claim. Justin, for his part, was the picture of confidence. He navigated the room with a regal air, accepting backpats and handshakes. He knew they were all looking. He knew they were all talking. He wanted them to. This was a power move. This was him, Justin Lane, rewriting his own narrative in real time. He caught the eye of Carol Ann, who was standing with a small clutch of women, her mouth agape. He gave her a slow, deliberate wink. "Justin, you have some nerve," his business partner Marcus Thorne muttered as he approached, a glass of whiskey in hand. "Where's Margaret?" "Feeling a bit under the weather tonight," Justin said smoothly, placing a proprietary hand on the small of Sienna's back. "Marcus, I'd like you to meet Sienna Monroe, our new head of digital marketing. Sienna, this is Marcus Thorne, my right-hand man." Sienna offered a dazzling smile. "A pleasure to meet you. I've heard so much about you." Marcus gave her a curt nod, his eyes flicking back to Justin. The look was one of disbelief and a warning. But Justin ignored it. He was invincible tonight. For the first hour, the gala proceeded as planned. Speeches were made, donations were pledged, and the gossip flowed as freely as the champagne. Justin and Sienna were the undeniable center of gravity, a vortex of scandal and speculation. People approached them with wide, fake smiles, their eyes darting between the millionaire and his young companion, hungry for details. Meanwhile, 3 miles away, in the velvet darkness of her living room, Margaret took a slow sip of her scotch. The liquid burned a clean, satisfying path down her throat. Her phone lay dark on the polished mahogany table beside her. She had given her instructions. Now all she had to do was wait. She had calculated the timing perfectly. She knew the rhythm of the gala, the cocktail hour, the opening remarks, the dinner service. The prime moment for maximum impact would be just as people were settling at their tables, phones momentarily emerging from pockets and purses before being put away for the main course. Back at the country club, the mayor was droning on from the podium about community spirit. A few attendees, bored with the speech, discreetly checked their phones. The first to see it was a junior real estate agent from a rival firm. His eyes widened. He quickly nudged his colleague, showing him the screen. A text message had just come in from a friend. "Dude, have you seen the billboard on Route 7? A silent digital wildfire began to spread through the ballroom. Phones initially hidden under napkins were now being passed from hand to hand under the tables. A ripple of gasps and shocked murmurs began to compete with the mayor's speech. Carol Ann's phone buzzed with a message from her daughter. It was a picture. Her perfectly made-up face went pale. She grabbed her husband's arm, her painted nails digging into his sleeve. "Oh my God, Robert, look!" Justin, seated at the head table, with Sienna preening beside him, noticed the shift in the room's atmosphere. The ambient buzz of conversation had changed, acquiring a frantic, charged edge. People were no longer looking at him with clandestine awe, but with something else, a mixture of pity, shock, and rapturous Schadenfreude-fueled glee. His phone vibrated in his pocket. It was Marcus. He ignored it. Then it vibrated again. And again. A text from his lawyer. A text from his PR head. Dozens of messages poured in. Sienna noticed it too. The admiring glances had turned into stares and whispers. "What's going on?" she murmured to Justin, her smile faltering. "Why is everyone looking at us like that?" With a growing sense of dread, Justin pulled out his phone. The screen was a cascade of notifications. He clicked on the latest message from Marcus. It contained a single image taken from a car, slightly blurry but utterly horrifyingly clear. It was the main digital billboard on Route 7, the largest and most visible advertising space in the entire county, the one that every single gala attendee would have passed on their way to the club. For the past week, it had been advertising the new Mercedes S-Class. Now it displayed something else entirely. Against a stark white background in enormous, elegant black letters, a font Margaret herself had chosen. A classic serif that was both beautiful and brutal was a message. Thinking of buying a property from Justin Lane. So was his mistress, Sienna Monroe. Ask him about the private terms he offered her on our family home at 18 Willow Creek Lane. Margaret Lane. Every sound in the world seemed to drain away for Justin. The blood rushed from his face, leaving a cold, clammy hollowness. He saw it all in an instant. The names, his name, Sienna's name, in 20-foot-high letters for the entire world to see. He saw the cunning, surgical precision of the words. It didn't just scream adultery. It slyly implied financial impropriety, a breach of fiduciary duty. Private terms. It was a phrase that would set the minds of investors and business partners racing. And then, the final devastating blow, the address. Their address. An open invitation for the media, the curious, the scorned to descend upon their home. His sanctuary. He looked at Sienna. The colour had drained from her face as she too read the message on a nearby guest's phone. The triumphant smile was gone, replaced by a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. Her social debut had just become a public execution. The mayor on stage had finally finished his speech, utterly oblivious. He ended with a flourish. "And let's give a big hand to one of our community's greatest supporters, Mr. Justin Lane." A smattering of confused, half-hearted applause broke out. But most of the room was silent, every single eye fixed on Justin. He felt 1,000 invisible knives piercing his skin. He was no longer a king in his castle. He was a spectacle, a clown in a spotlight he couldn't escape. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. He grabbed Sienna's arm, his grip far too tight. "We're leaving." He didn't walk, he fled. He pulled a terrified Sienna behind him, pushing through the stunned crowd. The whispers now followed him like a physical force, a wave of judgment and mockery. He could feel their stares on his back. As he burst through the ballroom doors and into the grand foyer, he fumbled for his valet ticket. He didn't want his car. He wanted to disappear. But there was no escape. Margaret had made sure of that. The trap had been sprung, and he was standing right in the middle of it. The humiliation was just the beginning. This wasn't an emotional outburst from a scorned wife. This was an attack. This was war. And he had just realized with sickening certainty that he was completely and utterly unprepared. The drive from the country club to 18 Willow Creek Lane was a blur of fury and panic for Justin. He gripped the steering wheel of the Aston Martin so hard his knuckles were white to the engine, a high-pitched scream that mirrored the chaos in his mind. Beside him, Sienna was sobbing, a series of hitched, desperate gasps. "How could she do this?" Sienna wailed, her mascara tracing black rivers down her cheeks. My name is up there for everyone to see. Justin, you have to fix this. You have to call your lawyers and get it taken down." You think I'm not trying? He snarled, stabbing at his phone with one hand, trying to get some through to his attorney, his P-team, anyone. Every call went to voicemail. They were either already inundated or screening his calls. The billboard, the address. Margaret had weaponized their home. As they turned onto their street, the full scope of Margaret's opening salvo became terrifyingly clear. The quiet, tree-lined lane was anything but. A handful of cars were already parked haphazardly along the curb. The unmistakable van of a local news channel was setting up its satellite dish aimed at the sky. A few neighbors were standing on their lawns pretending to inspect their rose bushes while their eyes were glued to the Lane mansion. "Oh my God," Sienna breathed, shrinking down in her seat. "They're here already." Justin slammed on the brakes in the driveway, the tires crunching on the gravel. The grand facade of his home, usually a symbol of his power, now felt like the scene of a crime. The warm lights glowing in the windows seemed to mock him. He stormed out of the car, leaving Sienna to scramble after him. "Margaret!" he bellowed, bursting through the front door. "Margaret!" He found her in the living room. The room was dark, save for a single lamp casting a soft glow on the armchair where she sat. The Macallan 25 sat on the table beside her, the glass half empty. She didn't look up immediately, taking another slow, deliberate sip before placing the glass down with a quiet click. "Justin," she said, her voice unnervingly calm, "you're home early. I take it the gala didn't go as planned?" The sight of her so placid and in control sent a fresh wave of rage through him. "What have you done?" he hissed, his voice trembling with fury. "A billboard. You put up a billboard to humiliate me, to humiliate her." He gestured wildly toward the front door, where Sienna hovered, looking lost and terrified. Margaret finally raised her eyes to meet his. There was no fear in them, no tears, only a glacial calm that chilled him to the bone. "Humiliate you," she repeated softly. "No, Justin. Humiliation is taking your 26-year-old mistress to an event you knew I wanted to attend, expecting me to sit at home and weep. This," she said with a slight, almost imperceptible gesture, "is a public relations strategy. Something Sienna, as your head of digital marketing, should appreciate." Sienna flinched as if struck. You bitch," she stammered. Margaret's gaze shifted to Sienna for the first time, cool and dismissive. "You are a guest in my home. I suggest you hold your tongue. You are collateral damage in a war you were naive enough to think you had a stake in. You are not a player here. You are a pawn, and you've just been sacrificed." Turning her attention back to Justin, Margaret's voice hardened. "You thought you could discard me like a piece of outdated furniture. You thought my silence was weakness. You miscalculated." "I will ruin you for this," Justin roared, taking a step forward. "I will have that sign taken down, and then I will take you to court, and I will take everything. The house, the kids, everything." "No, you won't," Margaret said, her voice dropping to an icy whisper. She reached down beside her chair and picked up a thick navy blue folder. She slid it across the polished surface of the coffee table. It landed with a soft final thud. "You see, Justin, the billboard was just the appetizer. That was for the town. This," she nodded at the folder, "is for you." Justin stared at the folder, as if it were a venomous snake. His hands shook as he reached for it. He flipped it open. The top page was a petition for divorce. Irreconcilable differences that he expected. But as he leafed through the pages, his blood ran cold. It wasn't just a divorce filing. It was a meticulously compiled dossier of his life. Bank statements from accounts he thought were hidden, flight manifests and hotel receipts detailing his trips with Sienna, sworn affidavits from the private investigator who had been tailing him for months. And then came the worst part. Behind the infidelity evidence was another section, title deeds to properties held by shell corporations, printouts of encrypted emails between him and Marcus Thorne discussing creative accounting on the new waterfront development project. a detailed analysis prepared by a forensic accountant, tracing a pattern of tax evasion and potential fraud stretching back 5 years. He looked up at her, his face ashen. The sheer scale of it, the cold, calculating precision, was breathtaking. This wasn't the work of a few weeks. This was a year-long clandestine operation conducted from right under his nose. How? He whispered the single word, a breath of defeat. You were careless, Margaret said simply. You underestimated me. You assumed the woman who ran your household and raised your children had no head for business. You forgot I designed buildings, Justin. I understand structure, and I know how to find the load-bearing walls. You, my dear husband, are a house of cards. She stood up, her composure absolute. My lawyer, David Chen, will be in touch with your lawyer in the morning. I'd advise you to hire a good one, not just for the divorce, but for the SEC investigation that will likely follow once certain documents are anonymously forwarded to the correct authorities. She paused at the foot of the grand staircase. Oh, and Justin, I've already had the locks changed on the master bedroom. You and your guest can use one of the spare rooms. I'd suggest you get some rest. It seems you have a very difficult day ahead of you. With that, she turned and ascended the stairs, her back straight, her steps unhurried. She didn't look back. Justin sank onto the sofa, the folder slipping from his nerveless fingers, its contents spilling across the floor. He stared at the damning evidence of his own destruction. The public sign had been a devastating blow to his ego. But this was an annihilation of his entire world. The king of Willow Creek had been checkmated by his quiet, unassuming queen, and the game was only just beginning. Sienna stood frozen in the doorway, the reality crashing down on her. She wasn't the next Mrs. Lane. She was just the girl in the red dress, caught in the wreckage of a war she never even knew was being waged. The day after the gala, a funereal quiet hung over 18 Willow Creek Lane. The news trucks had multiplied overnight, forming a grim, expectant cordon at the end of the street. The billboard on Route 7 was still there, a monument to Justin's folly, as his lawyers frantically tried to navigate the contractual labyrinth of a prepaid multi-day ad buy Margaret's media strategist had cleverly locked in. Justin had spent a sleepless night in a guest room that felt colder and more alien than any hotel. Sienna, after a hysterical, blame-filled argument, had called a cab in the pre-dawn hours and vanished, leaving behind only the faint scent of her perfume and the scarlet stain of her lipstick on a discarded tissue. He was alone, trapped in his own home, the architect of his own ruin. Upstairs in the master suite, Margaret was the picture of productivity. She had woken at her usual time, done a 30-minute yoga session, and was now on a conference call with her legal team. The initial offer from his side will be bluster and threats. David, she said, her voice crisp as she paced the length of her walk-in closet. He'll try to paint me as vindictive and unstable, using the billboard as proof. On the other end of the line, David Chen, a man whose calm demeanor belied a mind as sharp as a scalpel, chuckled softly. Let him. The billboard was a calculated risk, Margaret, and it paid off beautifully. It's framed the narrative. You're not a gold digger. You're a woman who was publicly scorned. It gives us the moral high ground. More importantly, it rattled him so badly, he won't be thinking clearly. And the other documents? Margaret asked, pausing to look at the sealed manila envelope on her dressing table. The insurance policy is ready, David confirmed. We have a trusted courier. If Justin even hints at playing hardball with custody or trying to hide assets, a duplicate of that folder lands on the desk of the U.S. Attorney's office. He'll get a call from his lawyer, who will get a call from me, explaining the concept of mutually assured destruction. He won't fight, Margaret. He can't afford to. This was the deeper game. The plan Margaret had spent a year constructing was not born of a single moment of anger, but of a slow, painful awakening. It began 18 months prior, not with the discovery of Sienna, but with a piece of mail. A notice from a bank she didn't recognize for an account she didn't know existed, mistakenly delivered to their home address instead of Justin's private post office box. It was for a small fortune sitting in a Cayman Islands account. Her first instinct was to confront him, to scream, to cry, to demand an explanation. But her architect's mind, the part of her that saw systems and structures, took over. Confrontation would only make him more careful. So she said nothing. Instead, she began to dig. She remembered her old college friend Amelia, whose messy divorce had involved a forensic accountant. That's how she found David Chen. Their first meeting took place in a sterile, anonymous coffee shop miles from Willow Creek. "He thinks I'm just a housewife," Margaret had told David, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea. "He thinks all I do is plan charity events and manage the children's schedules. He's forgotten who I was before I met him." David had listened patiently as she laid out her suspicions. He wasn't interested in the affair. That was for a different kind of lawyer. He was interested in the numbers. "If he's hiding this, he's hiding other things," he'd said. "Men like Justin Lane don't build empires without cutting corners. Our job is to find out where." And so began Margaret's double life. By day, she was the perfect Willow Creek wife. By night, after Justin was asleep or away on one of his business trips, she became a detective in her own home. She used her knowledge of his habits, his passwords, the name of his first dog, a detail he'd drunkenly shared years ago and long since forgotten to access his private computer, the one he thought was so secure. The trail she uncovered was more complex and corrupt than she could have ever imagined. It wasn't just one offshore account. It was a web of shell corporations registered in places like Panama and Delaware, used to launder money and hide profits from Lane Holdings. She found the emails with Marcus Thorne, their partner in crime. They discussed overinflating construction costs on publicly subsidized projects, kicking back money to themselves, and creating fraudulent invoices to deceive the IRS. Every piece of evidence was copied onto an encrypted hard drive which she kept in a safe deposit box 2 towns over. She learned about burner phones and virtual private networks. She transformed from a betrayed wife into a master of espionage. The affair with Sienna, when she finally confirmed it, was almost incidental. It was no longer the primary wound. It was merely the symptom of a deeper sickness, a rot of deceit that ran through every aspect of Justin's life. It was what gave her the final steely resolve to not just leave him, but to dismantle him. The billboard had been David's idea, a stroke of strategic genius. "We can't just leak the financial documents," he'd explained. "It has to come after a public provocation. Otherwise, you look like the aggressor. He needs to throw the first public punch." His affair flaunted at the gala is that punch. Our response, the billboard, is the counterpunch. It makes his crime public, and our reaction, however extreme, seem justified. It seizes control of the story. Now, as the fallout rained down on Justin, Margaret's plan moved into its next phase. Justin, as predicted, was making frantic calls. He cold-called Marcus Thorne first. "You need to fix this." "Justin," Marcus barked over the phone, "my name is all over those emails she found. How the hell did she find them?" "I don't know." Justin paced the guest room like a caged animal. "She was planning this for months, maybe longer. We need to get ahead of it. We need a story." "There is no story, you idiot," Marcus shouted. "You brought your girlfriend to the gala. You handed her a motive on a silver platter. If those documents get out, we're not just ruined, we're going to prison." Justin's blood ran cold. Prison. The word hung in the air, unimaginable, and yet suddenly terrifyingly real. His next call was to his lawyer, a bulldog named Arthur Fleming. Arthur's advice was grim. "Don't talk to her. Don't threaten her. Don't do anything until I speak to this David Chen. From what you've told me, she holds all the cards, Justin. All of them. Our first priority isn't winning, it's damage control. We need to find out what she wants." What Margaret wanted was simple, a clean break, full custody of the children. The house and a financial settlement so significant it would not only secure her and her children's futures, but would also permanently cripple Lane Holdings. She didn't just want a divorce, she wanted restitution. She wanted to reclaim the years she had invested, the career she had sacrificed, and the dignity he had tried to strip from her. Later that afternoon, David Chen called her back. "Arthur Fleming is a smart man," he said. "He's not making threats. He's asking for a meeting. He knows he's been outmaneuvered. Justin's empire is leveraged to the hilt, Margaret. The bank covenants on his major loans will have character clauses. A public scandal, let alone an SEC investigation, could cause the banks to call in their loans. He's facing a complete financial collapse." Margaret looked out the window. The news vans were still there. The whole town was watching, waiting. They thought this was about a cheating husband and a vengeful wife. They had no idea about the deeper game that was being played, about the secrets buried deep in the foundations of Justin's glittering kingdom. The billboard hadn't just been a sign, it had been a wrecking ball aimed squarely at those foundations. And now, the entire structure was beginning to tremble. The week that followed the gala was a slow-motion demolition of Justin Lane's life. The billboard stayed up for its full, glorious 3-day run, a constant, humiliating reminder of his transgressions. The story was picked up by national news outlets, framed as a sensational tale of a scorned wife's epic revenge. The name Margaret Lane became a trending topic, a symbol of female empowerment for some and a terrifying cautionary tale for cheating husbands everywhere. But the real damage was happening far from the public eye, in the sterile quiet of lawyers' offices and corporate boardrooms. The meeting between David Chen and Arthur Fleming was short and brutal. Arthur, accustomed to aggressive negotiation and blustering tactics, found himself completely stonewalled. David didn't negotiate. He dictated terms. "Here is the settlement offer," David said, sliding a single sheet of paper across the polished mahogany table. "Margaret gets the house at 18 Willow Creek Lane free and clear. She gets sole physical and legal custody of the children, with supervised visitation for Justin at her discretion. She will receive a lump sum payment of $60 million transferred from a list of pre-approved, legitimate accounts within 30 days. Furthermore, Lane Holdings will be professionally valuated, and she will receive a 40% stake in the company placed in a blind trust for her and the children." Arthur Fleming nearly choked on his coffee. That's absurd. That's not a settlement. That's a corporate takeover. He'll be ruined." David Chen leaned back in his chair, his expression unchanged. "He is already ruined, Arthur. The only question is whether his ruin is merely financial or if it includes a federal prison sentence. My client has in her possession documents that would interest not only the SEC, but the IRS and the District Attorney's Office. Those documents detail racketeering, tax fraud, and embezzlement. Marcus Thorne's name features prominently." He paused, letting the implication hang in the air. "Agree to these terms, and those documents remain in a vault. Fight us, and they will be delivered via courier tomorrow morning. The choice is Justin's. But I would remind him it's a choice Marcus will be very interested in." The threat was clear. It wasn't just Margaret he had to worry about. It was his own partner, who would do anything to save himself, including testifying against Justin. Checkmate. When Arthur relayed the terms to Justin, the magnate finally broke. The rage and bluster evaporated, replaced by the hollow shell of a man staring into the abyss. He had no choice. He agreed to everything. The first domino had fallen. The others followed in rapid succession. The board of directors of the charitable foundation he chaired called an emergency meeting and quietly requested his resignation. The country club, under pressure from influential members, led ironically by a sanctimonious Carol Ann, suspended his membership indefinitely. Business partners, who had once clamored for his attention, were now screening his calls. The partners from Dubai had never existed, but his very real investors from New York and Chicago were suddenly demanding audits and clarification on the creative accounting rumors that were now swirling like vultures. The empire of Lane Holdings began to bleed. The brand, once synonymous with success and luxury, was now tainted by scandal. Property sales stalled. Stock prices dipped. The banks, just as David had predicted, began making nervous inquiries about the stability of their loans. Justin was forced to start liquidating assets at a loss simply to cover the immediate costs of his divorce settlement and legal fees. Meanwhile, Sienna Monroe was experiencing her own personal apocalypse. Fired from her job at Lane Holdings for conduct unbecoming of an employee, she found herself a pariah. Her name and face had been plastered everywhere. She was the subject of vicious online trolling. The luxury brands that had once sent her free products now wanted nothing to do with her. The influencer career she had so carefully cultivated was destroyed overnight. Her attempts to secure a new job were met with polite but firm rejections. No one wanted to be associated with the scandal. Broke and desperate, she made one last humiliating attempt to salvage something from the wreckage. She found Margaret's private cell phone number through a mutual acquaintance and called it. Margaret answered on the second ring. "Hello, Margaret. It's Sienna Monroe." Her voice was small, stripped of all its former confidence. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "What do you want, Sienna?" Margaret's voice was not angry, but it was devoid of warmth. I wanted to say, I'm sorry," Sienna stammered. "I was a fool. I believed him. He told me he was leaving you, that we had a future. I never meant to hurt your children." "You were a symptom, Sienna, not the disease," Margaret said, her tone clinical. "You wanted the money and the status, and you were willing to overlook the cost to my family. I can't find it in myself to feel sorry for you. You made your choices." "But I've lost everything," Sienna cried, tears starting to flow. "My job, my reputation. I can't even pay my rent. Justin won't take my calls. I thought maybe you could understand." "Understanding and absolution are two very different things," Margaret replied coolly. "You were a willing participant in my husband's deception. The consequences of that are your own to bear. Do not contact me again." The line went dead. Sienna stared at her phone, the finality of Margaret's words echoing in the silence of her tiny apartment. There would be no help, no sympathy. She was truly on her own. Margaret Lane was not in the business of forgiveness. She was in the business of justice. The final domino to fall was Marcus Thorne. Terrified of the documents Margaret held, he did exactly what David Chen had predicted. He hired his own lawyer and approached the DA's office, offering to cooperate fully in an investigation into Lane Holdings in exchange for immunity. He threw Justin under the bus to save himself. The news broke a month later. Justin Lane, already a social pariah, was now officially under federal investigation for financial crimes. His assets were frozen. His company was placed into receivership. The king had not only been dethroned, his entire kingdom was being dismantled, brick by fraudulent brick. Margaret watched the news report on television from the comfort of her living room. Her living room. The divorce was finalized. The money was in the bank. The children were upstairs asleep in their beds, safe and secure. She felt a quiet, profound sense of finality. It was over. She had taken a man who tried to erase her, and had instead methodically and completely erased him from her life and from the pedestal of power he so arrogantly occupied. The town of Willow Creek was stunned not just by the scandal, but by the quiet, formidable power of the woman they had also tragically underestimated. 6 months later, the dust in Willow Creek had begun to settle, revealing a landscape irrevocably altered. The name Justin Lane, once spoken with reverence, was now uttered only in hushed, cautionary tones. His trial was pending, a foregone conclusion given Marcus Thorne's detailed testimony. He had sold his remaining assets, including his beloved Aston Martin and his collection of expensive watches, to pay his mounting legal bills. He now lived in a small rented condo on the other side of town, a ghost haunting the edges of the world he once ruled. The few times he was seen in public, he looked like a different man, gaunt, stooped, with the haunted eyes of someone who had lost everything and knew with bitter clarity that he had no one to blame but himself. In stark contrast, Margaret Lane was thriving. The house at 18 Willow Creek Lane, once her gilded cage, had been transformed. She had redecorated, replacing Justin's heavy masculine furniture with lighter, more modern pieces. The air inside seemed fresher, filled with the sound of her children's laughter instead of unspoken tensions. The news vans were long gone, replaced by the cars of mothers dropping off their kids for playdates with Liam and Chloe. The women of Willow Creek now looked at Margaret with a new kind of respect, one that bordered on awe. They had witnessed her public humiliation and her subsequent staggering victory. She was no longer just Justin Lane's wife. She was Margaret Lane, the woman who had brought down a king. When Carol Ann saw her at the local market, she no longer offered pitying smiles, but a genuine, "Hello, Margaret. You're looking wonderful." Margaret had not only won her one, she had won the respect of the very people Justin had intended to humiliate her in front of. But Margaret's victory was not defined by their approval or by Justin's demise. It was defined by her own resurgence. With her financial future secure, she had turned her attention back to her first love, architecture. She didn't need to work, but she wanted to. The part of her that had been dormant for 15 years, the creator, the designer, the builder, was awake and demanding expression. She founded her own boutique firm, Lane Design and Architecture, defiantly keeping the name but imbuing it with her own identity. Her first project was not a lavish mansion or a corporate high-rise. It was a pro bono project to redesign the outdated and underfunded Willow Creek Community Center. She poured her energy into creating a space that was beautiful, functional, and welcoming to all. It's so stark contrast to the exclusive gated world of the country club. She worked from a bright, airy office she had designed in what used to be Justin's home study. Blueprints and sketches covered the walls where his hunting trophies had once hung. She was in her element, her mind sharp, her purpose clear. She was building again, not just with steel and glass, but with the bricks of her own reclaimed life. One crisp autumn afternoon, she was on the construction site of the new community center, a hard hat perched on her head, discussing a structural change with the foreman. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from her son Liam. It was a picture of his acceptance letter to his first-choice university, a program in engineering. Below the image he had written, "Couldn't have done it without you, Mum. You taught me how to build things strong." Tears welled in Margaret's eyes, not tears of sadness or anger, but of profound, overwhelming gratitude. This was the true victory. Not the money, not the revenge, but this. Her children were happy and thriving. She was respected not for her husband's success, but for her own strength and talent. She had faced the darkest chapter of her life and had not only survived, but had emerged stronger, more authentic, and more powerful than ever before. She looked around at the rising frame of the community center, a skeleton of steel beams against the blue scumwing. It was a symbol of her new life, a structure built on a solid, honest foundation, designed to serve a purpose greater than just herself. She had torn down the house of cards Justin had built and was now constructing something real and lasting in its place. The whole town had been stunned by the wife's public sign. But the real story, the one that would be whispered in Willow Creek for years to come, was not about the sign on the billboard. It was about the woman who put it there, the architect who had so masterfully designed her own liberation, proving that the quietest person in the room is often the most powerful. Margaret Lane had finally built a life where she was the sole architect, and the view from the top was beautiful. Margaret's story is a powerful reminder that strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet, meticulous planning that creates the biggest impact. It's a story about reclaiming your power, rewriting your narrative, and refusing to be erased. She turned her pain into a plan and her betrayal into a blueprint for a new life, proving that the best revenge isn't just living well, it's strategically dismantling the empire of those who wronged you and building your own in its place. If you were moved by Margaret's journey from a silent wife to an unstoppable force, please show your support by hitting that like button. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder of their own inner strength. And for more stories of incredible resilience and dramatic real-life sagas, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell. Let us know in the comments what you think. Was Margaret a hero, or did she go too far? We can't wait to hear from you.